All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages, I am Beast Mike. You have now arrived at my train of thought. It's time to talk about the power rankings. As promised, there are changes at the top, there are changes at the bottom. Let's not waste any more time and get to business. We're going to start with the Fulton, Kentucky Zombie Tier. New York Jets, the number 0. They're the only team without a win. They're also the only ones without a turnover, at least one forced anyway. They turn over the ball a lot by themselves. They're not great at the whole keeping the fumbles away. They fumbled a lot lately. And this latest culprit was Breece Hall, and his fumble really changed the Dallas game. It was 30-3 before Dallas effectively kind of caught off the dogs. It never felt like a 37-22 game. The damage was done long before the Jets started scoring touchdowns. This was as easy and simplistic as a W as you could probably get in the current day and age in the NFL, considering last Sunday was full of chaos. The Jets look like a team that can absolutely go 0-17. The real question is, will they? New York Giants, 5 straight turnovers. I talked about the Jets and their issues with forcing turnovers and their inability to keep the ball away from the opponent. Well, the Giants made it a habitual thing, and for 5 straight possessions, the turnovers mounted, and the offense could do nothing about it. The fumble scoop score by New Orleans really was a game changer, and so was getting a bomb dropped on your head by Spencer Rattler and Rasheem Shaheed. And New Orleans winning by 2 scores has got to be very, very deflating and very humiliating when it looked like Jackson Dart and Cam Scatterbo are making some very good progress. They're in a little bit of trouble for tomorrow night, of course. That's because of the opponent they had, not just because of themselves. Now from the team that just beat the Giants, New Orleans. Won't go winless. Hey, the Saints didn't look too bad, and they looked respectable in a lot of their games this year. Not Seattle, but a lot of their other games, New Orleans has looked pretty respectable. And in this one, all their efforts paid off. A pretty good performance. Now, this roster's still badly undercooked, and this roster's nowhere near ready for prime time. But at the very least, this will be a normal bad season as opposed to a historically bad one. Tennessee, big boy drive. Gotta hand it to Cam Ward. This season thus far has not been great for him. However, this past game against Arizona, it ended really well. The last couple of possessions did. But the last one, of course, is the one where the signature performance will truly begin. A big boy drive, a gotta-have-it drive you need from the first overall pick in any draft class, if it's a quarterback especially. And Cam Ward delivered the goods. Good work on his part. Will there be more in the coming days? You would think. But we need to see them. Cleveland, Dillon and Judkins. Both these rookies have looked impressive, especially Judkins, who has been running circles around people and has been running at a very good clip thus far since he's been activated off of the after the drama that he had last summer. It's been a pretty good performance on his part. Dylan Gabriel also did not look shook against a good Vikings defense. He looked pretty productive at Tottenham. Now, how would it look now that there's more tape on him and that the Steelers have come calling? We'll see. But thus far, those 2 rookies look respectable on offense. The defense looked pretty good. They just didn't have enough to deal with Justin Jefferson. Cincinnati, Flacco arriving. So not only is Joe Flacco going to become the latest Cincinnati Bengal, he's also going to be QB1 for this game against the Packers. This may or may not be a good thing considering Green Bay allegedly has a pass rush, and Joe Flacco's a very stationary target who will also throw in those. That's not necessarily the thing I would prescribe or suggest, but if we've learned anything, Flacco's not afraid to take shots downfield, where Jamar Chase and T. Higgins can obviously thrive. Will they thrive, though, against a Packer team that's had a rest and at least some time to reflect off of the terrible defense they played in Dallas? Miami, clock is ticking. We've heard the rumors that Mike McDaniel is in deep, deep trouble after the failure that was winning last week against the Panthers. We heard the rumors that the guy that's coming next could potentially be Rex Ryan. Me personally, as a Dolphins fan, I don't love Rex Ryan. After the first 2 years of his tenure as a New York Jet coach, elite defense is sure, but the offenses have always been pretty anemic, and then the Buffalo tenure was a complete disaster. I don't know if I love Rex Ryan. There's a reason why he's been 9 and will probably be 10 years out of the game in terms of your head coach. Just don't buy it. I don't buy it. Meanwhile, for Mike McDaniel and company, is this a gotta have it, or is Rosenheimer going to drop the nuke if you don't get it against the Chargers? In Las Vegas, Colts were merciful. That felt like a game in a situation where Indianapolis could have hung 60 if they wanted to. Instead, they decided to stop at 40. And that may be the worst thing you could say about this, because it felt like the Raiders were making a little bit of progress, and then the block kick happened last week against the Bears, and then the Colts basically had their way with them at every point in the battle that was between the Raiders and Indy. This was ugly, and Ashton GT was pretty much locked down. It wasn't great. Jonathan Taylor didn't have to have that great of a game, and they still won 40-6. Not great, Raiders. Speaking of the Raiders, they're going to be in one of the games of interest. They play the Titans. And I guess I got to say this from this particular perspective. Cam Ward, you did this against a decent Cardinals team. What can you do for an encore against a pretty bad Raider one? Can the Titans offensive line, who has been much maligned over the last few weeks, can they deal with Max Crosby? How well will they deal with Max? That's something I will need to see. Conversely, on the other side of things, can Jeffrey Simmons and the Tennessee Titan defense do anything to cause the damage and destruction that a lot of defenses will cause against Geno Smith? We threw 3 innos last week against the Colts. And can the Tennessee do what other teams have done over this time period? And then there's Patriots and Saints. And it's a mix of, okay, New Orleans, you got to win. Now what? What are you going to do for an encore? What are you going to do now against a Patriots team that looks pretty good? Can you cause them to make some mistakes? Can you keep it close like you did against Buffalo? A question I will need to see answered. And in the case of New England, how do you follow the biggest win you've had in years? I'll get to New England, obviously, in a moment. But how do you follow that up? And can you follow that up productively? Only time will tell. Speaking of the South, we're going to go to Birmingham, Alabama for the Monkey's Paw Tier. Baltimore. Is Harbaugh doomed? I was really struggling with where to put the Ravens. Do I put the Ravens here, or do I put them in zombie tier? Their defense is absolutely zombie tier worthy. But I gotta know, is John Harbaugh in trouble? It feels like this was last chance saloon in Baltimore before changes had to be done, because they can't keep going like this. There's just no way. And now that the defense is cratering and self-destructing and obviously partially hurt, I just don't see how Baltimore can possibly survive in one piece and run this back next year. Especially after what in the world Houston just did. Carolina, what are you? Are you the team that just stole a game from Miami and destroyed Atlanta? Or are you the team that got absolutely pulverized by Jacksonville and destroyed by Arizona for the most part? Or what are you? Or the Patriots for that matter. What are you, Carolina? What happened with Rico Dowdle was incredibly impressive. There's no question in that. He was amazing last week. Carolina's offensive line did their job and did their job really well last week. Can you do this again? That is a question I will need to see answered. Arizona, 2025's dumbest loss. And this may stick for a while because, let's face it, that was as bad of a loss as I could possibly think of. And the third straight week where a loss was completely avoidable, to be honest. They had field goal losses at the horn, but this one against Tennessee is deeper than that. They had they gave the touchdown to Tennessee. They basically stopped themselves from scoring a touchdown, and obviously both decisions came back to bite them. This game should have probably been along the lines of like 40-3, like similar to what the Colts did to the Raiders. And somehow we never got there because Arizona decided to be dumb. You had no business losing this game, Cardinals. Like I said yesterday in my Railway recap, if you don't make the playoffs based off these last 3 weeks, it's your own fault. You've been warned. Houston, another free win. Because Baltimore's defense doesn't exist. It didn't exist when they were healthy. It truly doesn't exist now. And I felt like CJ Stroud kind of went back to rookie Stroud, to be honest. He did his thing, and there was really no stopping him from the perspective of the Ravens. Nothing they could really do to get in the way of that. That was an impressive performance by Houston. The Texans are going to have to do this against better teams, of course, but let's face it, Their 3 losses have all been by a combined total of 13 points. They've destroyed their 2 wins. Houston, can you do this against quality teams or decent ones? Time will tell. Dallas, Javonte's been great. This has been a really sneaky good signing. Javonte Williams has stabilized the Cowboys' run game and has brought a physical toughness that has not been seen for the Cowboys in a while in terms of the running game. And even without the Tylers up front last week, or some combination of them, Javonte Williams still got busy. He had that long run and obviously touchdown, which really continued the damage that was done. Jake Ferguson's also really playing well lately. He's got another tutty against the Jets. And, of course, the George Pickens trade has worked out very well, as Dallas has really needed the number 1 receiver to step up, aside from CeeDee Lamb, and Pickens has done as such. When Lamb does return, though, the Cowboys might actually be in really good shape. Chicago, scene of crime. We remember last year, the Bears started out really well. And then the Tyreek Stevenson play happened, the Hail Mary that Jaden Daniels dropped on the Bears' heads. Noah Brown caught it in the end zone. And it was like 2 entirely different seasons were made based off that one particular play. The Commanders season went up and way up, and their stock went way up. And they went all the way to the NFC Championship riding that momentum. Meanwhile, the Bears, they almost completely lost out. And I'm very, very serious. They lost pretty much every game left except for the Packers at the very end. Matt Eberflus was confirmed to be incredibly incompetent and got fired for it. And Caleb Williams, his rookie year, never went anywhere after the Hail Mary in question. It was a terrible situation for the Bears. Why do I say this is the scene of the crime? Well, Monday night, Chicago's going back to D.C. and back to FedEx Field to deal with said Commanders. Another Caleb versus Jaden battle. Who wins the rematch? And will there be another devastating end to said rematch? Questions that we will need answered and we'll get answers to on Monday. Minnesota, decent vacation. So the Vikings have started against the AFC North and have played 3 of the 4 teams. They absolutely slaughtered the Bengals. They lost to the Steelers and obviously beat Cleveland. The latter 2 being over in the international games, and Minnesota looked respectable in both games. They just started way too late against Pittsburgh, and Cleveland had just held it together, and was enough to get it done. Now, I would like to see Minnesota get back to what they've been on defense, and maybe part of that's because of the injury to Andrew Van Ginkel, but Minnesota's, I think, in okay shape as long as they get okay quarterback play, because the rest of it will probably fall into place. Find Jefferson, Addison, or Thielen, or Hawkinson, and I think you're going to be okay. Carson Wentz. And Washington. Welcome back, Jaden. Washington's another team that I kind of wanted to put in a different tier, and they just didn't have enough room for it. The Commanders will probably earn their way into the playoff tier in due time. In the meantime, this was a good performance against the Chargers. Their defense basically clamped up the Charger offense after the first quarter. Their offense got it together slowly and surely, and even without Terry McLaurin, there's been really good production from Deebo Samuel, who has every bit looked the part of the wide receiver 1 that he was a while back in San Francisco. It's kind of been some of their parts creating a whole situation where everybody's contributing and doing an efficient thing to make sure everyone else's job is easier. And I think that's a really good way for Washington to do it. Their defense isn't anywhere near as bad as it was last year, and their offense is simply solid. With Jaden Daniels, sometimes it's all you need to be. Good job, Washington. Now let's get to the games of interest in the Monkey's Paw tier. Rams, Ravens. The pattern for Baltimore's defense has been this: arrive, get cooked, leave. In most cases, you lose, with exception to Cleveland. In most cases, you take the L otherwise. The Rams have a really good offense. The Ravens' defense isn't anywhere near healthy. Lamar Jackson probably not playing either, and they have a good defensive line that could neutralize a lot of offensive lines even when healthy. Derrick Henry, I don't love his chances of success here. I do like the success chances of Puka Nacua because he's been like that pretty much from the word go this season. I don't love Baltimore's chances of actually stopping him. That seems like a problem. As for the Ravens and Cooper Rush, I don't love his chances either of being able to do well against a decent Ram defense. And again, said Ram defensive line that is known to cause havoc and beat people up. This may not go well for Baltimore. And now the other game of interest in this tier, Cowboys-Panthers. Again, Carolina, what exactly are you? Are you the team that stole a game from Miami and destroyed Atlanta? Or are you the team that will generally get destroyed, see the Patriots, or mostly the Cardinals, or the Jaguars? What are you, Carolina? In theory, Rico Dowdle's not going to have another 200 on him. And if Chuba Hubbard comes back, he probably shouldn't either against Dallas' defense, even though Dallas' defense has been generally bad for a lot of this season. In theory, Bryce Young will have a meh game as opposed to, oh, that was decent. Well, except for the 2 turnovers. Those turnovers were bad. Carolina, what are you? And Dallas, can you keep this momentum going? J.C. Horn versus George Pickens. A battle I am most looking forward to seeing. Onward to the Wilmington, Delaware playoff tier. New England, a signature win. This is probably the best win the Patriots have had since the Tom Brady days, and that's saying something, considering Mac Jones actually got a team to the playoffs. They were buried alive under Buffalo snow, which is very bad, in said playoff game, but we're going to talk about that right now. What we're talking about is how Drake May has QB1, franchise 1 written all over him, and how composed he looked. He wasn't spectacular except for throwing it to Stephon Diggs, but he has been very good with throwing it to Diggs or Hunter Henry. And the Patriots in general, when they're not making mistakes, are a good team. Can they remain as such and take advantage of what's a pretty soft part of their schedule? If they can, they will absolutely make the playoffs. Atlanta, major test incoming. They will be playing the Bills, and this should be a pretty fun game to see the Falcons play as they come off their bye. Can their pass rush get home? Atlanta was off last week. Can their pass rush get home, and can they kind of sort of figure things out with Mike Penix? Where Mike Penix is another one where we need to know, which are you? Are you the guy who got destroyed against Carolina, or are you the guy who looked really good against Washington? We're going to find out a lot about Atlanta in the coming days. I'll talk about this game a little bit more in a moment. Pittsburgh, how's the defense? The Steelers just had a week off after their trip overseas and beating the Vikings. And I do kind of want to know, is the defense back to what we've expected them to be? Where they are ferocious, where they are relentless, where TJ Watt spends part of his time being a god, and where Alex Highsmith and company kind of supplement him and let Watt do his thing. Is the Steelers' defense capable of getting back to that? As for the offense, DK Metcalf and Aaron Rodgers have built up a good rapport. Rodgers has been generally good with Pittsburgh. I don't trust the O-line still, but I do trust that Rodgers and Metcalf have something there. The running game is a little spotty sometimes, even though Kenneth Gainwell did have a good game. I do need to see a little bit more consistency from it, but generally speaking, it looks like it's a promising situation for Pittsburgh. I just want to know if the defense is back to what we've expected it to be, permanently. Kansas City, somewhat surprising loss. I don't think we were ready for the Chiefs to lose this game. I don't think we were ready for the Chiefs to blow that lead. And I just don't see how we were all ready for Pat Mahomes to throw that went 99 yards back the other way. It just didn't feel like a game that Kansas City losing just made sense. And somehow it happened. Chiefs are somehow only 2-3, and yet I don't think anyone thinks that Kansas City is in trouble of any kind, to be frank. They got a monster game I'll talk about later, but I don't think anyone thinks Kansas City is in true trouble because the AFC West is rather close-knit. Well, not the Raiders, but everyone else. Speaking of that AFC West, LA Chargers. Injuries are increasing. They lost offensive linemen. Maybe it's on the board. Joe Alt can return this week. We'll see. If he does, that'd be vital for an offensive line that really had minimal answers against the Commanders after the first quarter. We already know that Amari Hampton's going to be out for a month after his injury in the Commander game. And we know the Chargers line has not graded out well at all. At least the 5 guys who are left standing at the end of the Commander game. If Alt comes back, obviously things should change. Justin Herbert does not look great over the last few weeks either. He can get the ball to Quentin Johnston in theory. Quentin Johnston may still have good hands for some reason. But We do need to know if it's possible for the Chargers, without their injuries, to be able to hold it together. Or with their injuries, to be able to hold it together, I should say. Seattle, 2 turnovers. That's the difference between what they currently are at 3-2 and what they could be at 5-0. They had the turnover and at the end of the Niner game. They have the turnover here at the end of the Bucs game, where Sam Darnold had 2 gotta-have-it drives, and that's how they've ended. It's not great. Their offense could go bar for bar with a lot of teams, as they did with Tampa Bay. Their defense, generally sturdy, did get cooked a little bit, but Tampa Bay's offense, even though it wasn't healthy with Bucky Irving or Mike Evans, is capable of doing that to a lot of squads. I do think Seattle is in very good shape, though. I think they're going to be generally fine, even with the NFC West being as competitive as it is. I just need to know if Sam Darnold, when it's got to have it time, can he consistently get it done, at least as a Seahawk? We haven't really seen it in other uniforms. Speaking of the Niners, they're next. One at home. Because let's face it, that was a home game. It felt like a home game. It looked like a home game. It smelled like a home game for San Francisco over in Los Angeles. Have you seen those pictures? My goodness. And the crowd reactions and all of it. It was not great for San Francisco, for the Rams at all, when it came to establishing some sort of home field advantage. The Niners have shown themselves, despite their injuries, to be a team that is very capable of persevering. Mac Jones took a horrible beating, and somehow the Niners were able to survive it. Their CMC and Fred Warner are effectively carrying a bunch of backups, and it has not mattered. The Niners are still somehow 4-1, and to be honest, they're a bad Brock Purdy game away potentially from being 5-0. That's how good the Niners have been this year, despite all the injuries and all these circumstances and all the adversity. And I guess the question is simple. When Brock Purdy's healthy, is he the starter? I'm not sure that he should be. Speaking of Jacksonville, the team that beat the Niners, they're next. Biggest win since, I would argue, probably the divisional round game against the Steelers, where they went to Pittsburgh and dropped the 40-piece on their heads. This was a statement win for the Jaguars, and an incredibly impressive win. Sure, they got the playoff win against the Chargers. Well, really, Chargers lost in that playoff game. But yes, I think that this win is a statement win of legitimacy. And it's like, oh, Jacksonville might legitimately be good this year. And they got 2 looming showdowns coming up with the Colts at different points this year. I'm looking forward to seeing what they can be. In the meantime, between time, it's a matter of Jacksonville continuing this momentum. Their defense has obviously been outstanding for most of this year and forcing turnovers. Their offense is capable of doing damage, whether it's on the ground or in some cases in the air, when Trevor Lawrence isn't mid. I like what I'm seeing from the Jaguars. I like where they're going here, potentially. Can they continue this trend? Let's go to the games of interest in this tier. One of them will involve the Jaguars, but that game will come second. Bills-Falcons, Monday night game. It's a doubleheader on Monday night for some reason. And the Bills-Falcons will probably be the better of the 2 games. Buffalo, after what was a rough loss, and I'll talk about the Bills in a sec, they go to Atlanta to deal with a Falcons team coming off a bye. And in the case of Atlanta, Mike Penix and company had a good game against the Commanders, and this followed up what was a disaster game in Charlotte. I do want to know, when it comes to the Falcons, are you capable of punching above your weight class? That is a question I will need to know. Can you get some pressure on Josh Allen? Now, New England really didn't. Not many teams really have. But can they get some sort of pressure on Josh Allen and cause him to make some of the mistakes that he made in the Patriots game? A.J. Terrell versus any of the Bills receivers is something I'm most looking forward to. And how will any of the Bills receivers deal with Drake London or Kyle Pitts? Or Bijan Robinson in terms of the front 7 of the Bills attack? Questions I will need to see answered. And then Seattle and Jacksonville. Seattle's second longest potential road trip when it comes to facing that Seattle could possibly make in the NFL to an AFC opponent is Jacksonville. And this is a really interesting situation. The emotional week that Jacksonville had in beating Kansas City, Seattle, the devastating loss they took when facing another Floridian team in Tampa Bay at home. Now Seattle's flying across country in a situation that is pretty vital. And in Seattle's case, they got to keep up with the Niners and the Rams. Can Seattle do that against a Jacksonville team whose defense is just as vital and productive as theirs has been? JSN versus that secondary is something I'm looking forward to seeing. Brian Thomas against Seattle's secondary. against Witherspoon. If Witherspoon is able to play, that would be a pretty vital situation. Can Seattle's pass rush get to Trevor Lawrence? That's something I will also need to see answered. Let's get into the New York City title tier, even though neither of the New York teams are anywhere close to this tier. Anyway, we'll start with the Rams. Head-scratching loss. This is the second of those this year for LA, who had a couple of really weird losses to the Niners and the Eagles. Puka Nacua has been absolutely absurd and can't be stopped right now. And Calvin Williams usually scores touchdowns. It's kind of what he does. He's kind of good at that. I would expect the Rams to get back on track against a bad Ravens defense and probably dominate Baltimore. But what if they don't? Tampa Bay, lead never safe. And it's your lead, not theirs. Tampa Bay is a come-running team when it comes to the fourth quarter, and they've pretty much earned the distinction of being the most clutch team in the NFL this year. When gotta-have-it drives are in play, they go get them, and they don't hesitate to go get them. That in itself is an impressive trait. They're not even fully healthy, and nor had they been the entire season, and they're still 4-1. That's impressive. Imagine Tampa Bay's offense at full strength, i.e. a capable, functioning offensive line, Mike Evans, Bucky Irving, and of course Emeka Egbuka, who's been the offensive rookie of the year so far 5 weeks in. I would like to think Tampa Bay being healthy is a very scary situation. From one bay to the other, from Tampa to Green, was rest good? I do kind of want to know where Green Bay is defensively after what Dallas did to them a couple weeks ago. They had no answers for George Pickens. They had no answers for Javonte Williams. They had no answers really against Dak, and yet they tied. Now that they're back off this bye, they get a Bengals team that just got Joe Flacco and obviously still have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins who are able to do their thing. Can the Packers do what a lot of other teams have been able to do, which is get home against what is now basically a stationary target in Flacco? Micah Parsons, are you going to put up the numbers that we all honestly expected you to when you were traded to Green Bay? Buffalo, bad but fine. That was not a great performance from the Bills, as we know. They did not look great at mostly any point in this game. And this is including Josh Allen, who looked back to his 23 self, where turnovers were in duplicates. It was not great. Now, Buffalo should be okay. They should be fine. They should win their division, all that good stuff. But this was straightforward, and I think we all penciled them in for 6-1, 7-0, 8-1 as we go deeper into the schedule. We all kind of penciled them into the showdown with Kansas City with no losses. Now they have one, okay, fine. They're not going to have another self-destructive performance before the Chiefs game and have a second loss, are they? Philadelphia, OC concerns. This play calling for the offensive side of the ball has just been pretty rough at different points this season. We've seen them be stagnant at times. We've seen them be electrifying at times. It's never been a complete game from this team, and that goes for the defense as well. It's never been a complete game, and we kind of maybe got used to it last year because that's all the Eagles did for the most part, especially from November on, was complete games and just dominate most teams in front of them. It hasn't been like that, and that's a little disappointing to see with all the talent they have. Can Eagles get it together tomorrow night against the Giants? In theory, that answer is yes, and there'll be enough Eagles fans to show up at MetLife to make it feel like a home game. Does Saquon Barkley get more than 6 touches? Because that seems like a criminal offense that's all he got last week against the Broncos. Speaking of which, Denver's next. Impressive comeback. I gotta say, Denver's had a weird season thus far with their 2 losses. This felt like a third one, and it felt like straightforward stuff that was happening until the third quarter began and the Broncos started to make a move. And the Broncos really got it together, especially their defense. Nick Bonino has been outstanding thus far. It might be Defensive Player of the Year. That's how worthy he has been thus far, terrorizing quarterbacks, especially Jalen Hurts. They clamped up Saquon Barkley. Even with only 6 touches, he only had 30 yards. Good work. PS2 did his part against A.J. Brown. Good work. DeVonta Smith had a decent game, but they really did a very good job, the Broncos defense did. And Bo Nix, as long as he doesn't miss the throws, he's generally fine. You just gotta chill with the deep ball, though. The deep ball accuracy sometimes just isn't there. Denver's in good shape, though. Indianapolis, nice to Raiders. They could have hung 60. Let's be honest here. The Colts could have hung 60 if they really, really tried, and they decided to call the dogs off and just go, all right, let's get out of here with the 40, and we'll move. The Colts have looked really, really impressive thus far. They're one disastrous A.D. Mitchell game away from being 5-0. Let's be real here. They've looked like a very complete team. They don't get pressures, but they do get sacks, which, okay, that works fine. They don't make too many mistakes, Daniel Jones included, and they force some when they have to. They're not overly full of names of who's and all that on their roster, but they all seem to work together to make a very well-oiled machine. A Lucas Oil Stadium machine, if you will. Good work by the Colts to keep this up. There's 2 impending showdowns with the Jaguars coming. I'm very much looking forward to both of them. And Detroit's number 1 this week. A dominant month. Since week 1, no team's been better than the Lions. They have destroyed everyone and everything in front of them without much of a problem. All of their guys have shown up at various points. We saw in the Bears game when they hung a 50-piece and made Ben Johnson kind of look envious, perhaps, when everybody showed up. We saw what happened the following week. They were nice to Cleveland. They mauled down last week the Bengals as they continue to rip through the AFC North. In the Ravens game, Sonic and Knuckles basically punched Baltimore in the face repeatedly, as well as their defensive line who got 7 sacks on Lamar Jackson. It was a very dominant month for a Lions team that we were all wondering after week 1, are they not good anymore? As it turns out, they're great. Still great. And their defense isn't as terrible as it was previously last year. They're getting pressure to the quarterback, and the Terry Arnold loss may be kind of rough for a couple weeks, but as long as Arnold's back, by the end of the month, I would like to think that the Lions are going to be just fine. I'll talk about their game in a few moments. Speaking of which, games of interest in title tier. Bucks, Niners, 2 very different 4-1 teams with a similar common thread. Injury issues. A lot of them. Tampa, as I've said before, has not been at full strength at all this season. The Niners can relate, as they've been even more injury prone. Tampa's at least had Baker Mayfield, who I'd argue might be the MVP as we're a third of the way through this season. He's been outstanding. Will we get anything from Bucky Irving? Will he play at all this week? If not, can Rachaad White continue his solid effort? He scored last week. And what happens with Emeka Egbuka? How will the Niners try to cover him? Because he's been uncoverable as this season has gone on. Meanwhile, for San Francisco, Mac Jones has played pretty well. He also took a heavy beating. Fortunately for him, he'll have 10 days to recoup and rest before Vita Vea and company try to say hello and meet him in the backfield with the football in his hands. Can Mac Jones stay upright? Can CMC help him out in this endeavor and trying to get the ball downfield? How many Niner receivers are going to be healthy? Kendrick Bourne had a good game in Los Angeles. Can you have another one against Tampa Bay? This should be a fun matchup between these 2 4-1 teams, and whoever wins is in real good shape in the NFC standings. But the main event is going to be Sunday night. Chiefs, Lions, showdown in Kansas City. Detroit has been unstoppable since week 2, as they have run through the entire AFC North, sans Pittsburgh, and the Bears, which was a free win for them. And now we're dealing with a Chiefs team who's got a respectable defense. But at the same time, I do wonder this. Kansas City stopped this offense, which has mowed down a lot of the ops over the last month. And conversely, what about the Chiefs' offense against the Lion defense? Aiden Hutchinson, where will he line up? Will he line up against Juwan Taylor? Will he line up against the rookie from Ohio State? I wonder, where does he line up? And how much havoc can he wreak? And how many false starts would Juwan Taylor not get called for? That's something else I'm also going to want to know and going to want to see as this goes on. This is a major test for both these teams. And if Kansas City loses, then they're at 2-4. The road to the 1 seed gets that much harder, especially with a game with Buffalo coming up and the lost tiebreaker to Jacksonville already on your board, and the lost tiebreaker to the Chargers for that matter, plus 2 games with Denver. So like I said, the road to the 1 seed for Kansas City gets that much harder if they're at 2-4. And for Detroit, monster game to keep up with whatever happens with Green Bay, because they lost the tiebreaker there thus far, and everything else with Philly or the Rams or the Niners or the Seahawks or the Bucks. There's a lot at stake on Sunday night in Kansas City. So that'll do it for these power rankings. As always, the picks will be linked below in the description. Check them out on the Sports Lounge page. You can also see next week, I'm going to try to incorporate some NHL stuff, as the NHL season will start this week. And I'll try to link all 32 teams in the NHL with all 32 teams in the NFL based off their local affiliation. As for the Railway recap, Giants and Eagles, you're going to be the first stop of my next train of thought.